The Second World War was devastating for many parts of the world, but in America, since most men were fighting in the war, it created opportunities that women otherwise wouldn't have had. These included new jobs, more education, and different kinds of sports. Women have continued to make progress in their fight for equal rights. World War II provided many opportunities for women, and since that time, women's competitiveness has grown, making them more prepared than men for the 21st century.
Before World War II, most women married and became homemakers. They stayed home to cook, care for their children, and clean. In 1940, women consisted of less than one-fourth of the labor force. If a woman did not become a homemaker, she was usually limited to jobs such as nursing, becoming a secretary, or teaching. Very few women were involved in politics.
Women were also limited in the sports they could play. Society looked at them as unfeminine or manly if they played sports besides tennis or golf. Men had more opportunities to get jobs, compete in sports and politics, and become educated.
In 1941, most men left America to fight in the armed forces. Women replaced men in the workforce and were encouraged to do war jobs by Rosie the Riveter, a famous propaganda character. War jobs included making weapons, ammunition, uniforms, and aircraft for the soldiers fighting in the war. By the end of the war, America had outproduced all of the Axis powers combined. Many of these workers were women. They showed themselves and society that they had potential to be better than men, but many feared that as soon as the men returned from the war, women would be pushed out of the labor force and back into homemaking. This wasn't the case. By 1950, women made up 29.6% of the workforce.
The war also created sports opportunities for women in 1943, when Philip Wrigley created the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League to temporarily replace the major leagues while the men were at war. The league had 14 teams total. Wrigley was trying to create teams with girls that looked attractive yet played well. He succeeded. When women athletes whom men considered gorgeous showed aptitude at sports, it offered something new and surprising. But what really kept fans coming back was the women's quality of play. The league produced attendance records of 1 million people for one season, showing that women's baseball had been accepted in the world of sports and entertainment. Americans were seeing that women could play and attract the same number of fans per capita as men's baseball. The league stayed strong until 1954, when fan attendance dropped, more because of new entertainment, television, than men actually returning from the war.
World War II had created opportunities for women in careers in sports, and since then women have been competing with men for job, education, and sport opportunities.
After the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was ended in 1954, women fought for their rights to compete and play the same sports as men. The types of sports that society found socially acceptable for women to play were gradually increasing. In the 1948 Summer Olympics, women were allowed to participate in 9 events, whereas in 1936 they were only allowed to participate in 6 events.
Between the 1950s and 60s, the push for civil rights helped increase the status of women and minorities. Feminist activism rose the consciousness of those involved in women's sports, and women sought more athletic opportunities. In 1969, a schedule of national championships for women's sports was announced that included gymnastics and track and field. Swimming, badminton, and volleyball followed in 1970, and in 1972, basketball was added. In the same year, Title IX was passed, and in 1973, Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs in the Battle of the Sexes.
Title IX gave girls in education a better selection of sports in different levels of competition. This was a huge and necessary step for gender equality in schools all across the nation. In 1970, 2 years before the enactment of Title IX, the average number of varsity women's NCAA teams per school was 2.5 teams. In 1978, the year of mandatory Title IX compliance, that number jumped to 5.61 teams and continued to increase. In 1973, Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs in 3 straight sets after he challenged her to a match where he boasted of his superior male attributes. The match gained a lot of media attention and was soon referred to as the Battle of the Sexes. Bobby Riggs used to be a tennis champion, but he lost a lot of respect when Billie Jean King beat him. He had intended to prove that men were better athletes than women, but was proved wrong. Women across the nation saw this great accomplishment and gained a sense of independence and confidence. In the 1980s and 90s, women had become accepted into the sports world and were able to play a large variety of sports. In the 1980s, women finally could run in marathons in the Olympics. Before, women had not trained properly, so men thought they were too weak. Though, in the 1980 through 1990 Olympic Games, women were participating in almost as many sports as men. College women's athletic participation has increased from 15% in 1972 to 43% in 2001. In 2002, the average number of NCAA women's teams per school was 8.14. The number of teams has continued to grow, and in 2008, there were 8.65 teams per school. Currently, women are involved in professional soccer, basketball, golf, volleyball, tennis, and softball.
Education for women has changed greatly since the Second World War. Between 1967 and 2000, the proportion of 18 to 24-year-old women that were enrolled in college increased in 20.5 percentage points. The proportion of men ages 18 to 24 enrolled in college decreased 3.8 percentage points. The percentage of females that completed 4 or more years of college increased from 5.2% in 1950 to 18.4% in 1990. This growth in women in higher education is leading to more job opportunities and higher paying jobs. Women currently have 60% of all bachelor and master degrees and 1/2 of law and medical degrees. Since the 1970s, men are more likely to hold only a high school diploma.
Years ago, women were a small percentage of the workforce. During much of the 20th century, especially the 1970s and 80s, women's share of the labor force increased. By 1990, the workforce was 47% female and 53% male. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, and until the recession, women remained less than 49% of the workforce. However, that percentage has now passed 49% and may cross the 50% threshold for the first time. The one thing that women are having a hard time making progress in is equal pay. Although slowly, that gap is being closed. In 2007, the average hourly pay for women was 82% of men's. This was an increase in 24 percentage points since 1979. In January 2009, the unemployment rate for men was 9.1%, whereas women's was 6.6%. Also, in the same year, women held up almost 50% of the nation's jobs. Of the 15 job categories projected to grow the most in the United States, all but 2 are occupied primarily by women. Labor economists predict that soon women will surpass men in the workforce.
As women's status in society has grown, women have emerged as powerful players in United States politics. The number of women in the U.S. Congress has increased over time, especially in the House of Representatives. This graph shows that the percent of women in the state legislatures has increased even more than the increase of women at the national level. Women have continually been elected or appointed to extremely high positions in the U.S. government. In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor was the first female appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 2012, 3 out of the 9 Supreme Court justices are female. In 1992, California elected 2 women to the Senate in the same election, and in 2004, Washington State had a female governor and 2 female U.S. senators serving at the same time. 3 years later, Nancy Pelosi was elected as the first woman Speaker of the House. Currently, 3 women, Madeleine Albright, Condoleezza Rice, and Hillary Clinton, have served as Secretary of State. As respected and capable members of society, women are on the rise in American politics.
Although women may not play sports at the same level as men, they have become more confident competitors, preparing them to be assertive in other areas of life. Athletes tend to do better in education than non-athletes. Because women now have more opportunities in sports, this allows them to perform better in education and in the workforce. As with sports, males still hold the majority of positions in the government. Nonetheless, it is indisputable that women have been gaining political influence. World War II provided a chance for women to show their ability, even while they were meeting society's expectations for homemaking and femininity. Females are gaining ground in the realms of political influence. Currently, more women are enrolled in colleges and universities than men. They earn 60% of all master and bachelor degrees and have a higher graduation rate. In 2010, for every 2 men who got a college degree, 3 women did the same. Studies show that college is the gateway to economic success, so women will have more of an advantage than men to succeed. World War II provided women with the confidence that they could succeed in the workforce. Even when the men returned from the war, women refused to be pushed back into homemaking. The number of women in the labor force grew steadily, and today women make up the majority of the workforce. Studies show that today most jobs require social intelligence, open communication, and the ability to sit and focus. More women than men tend to carry these traits. Overall, the Second World War was a benefit to women in the United States. It caused them to gain their confidence in sports, politics, education, and careers. Women have continued to make progress in those areas, and they have achieved their goal to contribute their skills to society.